This show is all about interviewing interesting people and learning. The Price is Right is the longest running game show in American TV history. Superfan Theodore Slauson, who goes by Ted, spent his early life documenting and memorizing the exact prize amounts on the show. Now, when he attended tapings, he would help other contestants be successful. But then, one man he helped in 2008 had the perfect bid on the Showcase Showdown, like perfect bid to the dollar amount. And then there was a big scandal. Ted was, as a 2017 documentary called him, the contestant who knew too much. Now, I knew Ted would be an awesome guest for my show, so Ted Slauson is joining me now. Ted, thanks so much for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so first off, where did you grow up? Just kind of tell me about your background and why did you become a super fan of the show?
So I grew up in the Sacramento, California area. My dad was in the military. We moved a lot when my brothers and sisters were kids. I was too young to really remember the moves, but I started kindergarten in Citrus Heights, which is a suburb of Sacramento. And I was the only one of my siblings who didn't have to ever change schools except, going from elementary to middle to high. We were sitting around watching TV one day. It was a day off, may have been like Lincoln's birthday, Washington's birthday, and it was 1973. We only had one TV, and there were only 4 channels, and there were 6 kids. So that combination means that the older kids are probably going to get to pick what it is we're going to watch. And they wanted to watch this new show called The New Price is Right. And I thought, fine, whatever. I had seen commercials and I thought, well, that just looks over the top. And, I was so sophisticated at 6 years old or 7 years old. And so we watched the show and I, had nothing better to do. So I sat and watched it. And by the end of the show, it kind of really drew me in because of all the people winning prizes and, the different games that they would play. And from then on, I just kind of watched it whenever I could, which in the 70s was when I was off from school, so summertime or, if we had a holiday break or something. It wasn't until much, much later that when we got a VCR for the first time that I was able to start recording shows.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like my brother and sister, we watched it. That was like the summer. That's when you watched it. You did stuff early in the morning, but it was on, I don't know, maybe 10 in the morning, something like that. And you would watch it then. And yeah, you just got into it. And Bob was the man back in the day.
Yeah.
Were you always obsessed with numbers? And when did you know that you were a numbers guy?
I was a good student. I always did, pretty well in school. Probably around middle school, 6th grade, maybe 7th grade, I started noticing that I was more kind of able to do math a little bit better than the other subjects. So that was kind of what drew me in. And early on, when my brother and I would watch The Price is Right, because we used to play our own little home game, which is kind of embarrassing to talk about now, but he noticed early on that they would repeat prizes on the show. And so if you remembered that you had seen that refrigerator before, or you had seen that grandfather clock before, you might be able to get the price exactly right. And so that was also a reason why I started kind of memorizing the prices a little bit.
And that period of time, they essentially would have those prizes behind the curtain. I mean, it was not, they weren't bringing a bunch of prizes, they didn't have them in circulation. They had them behind the curtain and they would bring them out every so often.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so that's how you were able to kind of figure this out.
Yeah, we would keep, I don't remember if my brother did this too, but we would keep kind of written lists of what we would see on the show and how much it was. And then we would kind of use that when we would play our little home game. We could say, oh, it's grandfather clock, and use the actual price that it was on the show.
Yeah. No, I mean, entertainment back then, we didn't have iPads, we didn't have, and the computers were pretty terrible back then, so you had to come up with ways to entertain yourself. So, you know, a home game, no big deal. Tell me about the first taping that you were able to attend, and I'm assuming you had to be 18?
Correct. I had, loved the show all through my childhood, and in around 76, 77 is when they started canceling game shows and, making the soap operas longer. And so a lot of game shows got cut. And I kind of figured, well, this show's never going to make it till I'm 18. And so I was really surprised it made it, it did really well on the ratings. And so my friend who lived across the street, we're still friends. We just went on a road trip, got back 2-3 days ago. We decided we were going to go to Los Angeles as our first kind of adult trip. I was 18 and a half. We left, I think it was the Memorial Day weekend that we drove down to Los Angeles from Sacramento. And we had planned to go, I think I wanted to go first thing, which would have been Monday because they taped Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays back then. And we showed up at the studio on Monday, and it was kind of apparent there weren't people sitting on the benches, so we figured, well, something's up. And the security guard said, oh, the tapings for today were canceled. And he gave one reason, and then the next day Bob Barker gave a completely different reason. Not that it matters, but one of the reasons was there was a death in somebody's family. Incidentally, I recently learned that the Michael Larson Pressure Luck episode, I believe, taped the day before this cancellation, and I have no idea if that has anything at all to do with why they had to cancel the tapings. But so we came back the next day, and don't know how far in depth you want me to go into this story.
So what year was that?
1984. It was May of 1984.
And what do you remember about that episode? And you, I mean, vividly, you knew what stuff cost, correct? According to the documentary.
Right. I had gotten a computer a couple years prior, and so I had started making, I think it was a database program, or putting it in, I don't remember how I did it in the beginning, but it was a typewritten list or a printed list of prizes and prices. And my friend Dee had quizzed me on the way down to Los Angeles just for practice. And so I knew a lot of the prices. And the very first item up for bids was it was a swimming pool. I think it was a Muskin swimming pool, which I knew was $14.99. And our seats, because we got there kind of middle of the line for that first show, we were in the very back row in the middle, and you can hear me yell. In fact, this show airs semi-regularly on Pluto and some of the other networks that run the old Bob Barker episodes. But you can hear me yell $14.99 if you listen. And then when Bob Barker reads the price and it's $1,499, my friend Dee's head just snaps over to me like, you caught it exactly right. And a couple other people kind of were like, wait a minute, you just said that. So that was kind of funny. And then, the second item up for bids was a brass trunk that I had seen, a bunch of times. It was $7.95. You can hear me yell that out. I think I had probably 3-4 of the items correct. I helped. I don't know that I don't think I technically helped anybody win on that show, but I knew the prices and danger price. I knew which one not to pick. Didn't know the cars because I hadn't really perfected my car documentation at that point.
At what point did Bob Barker or the producers realize that Theodore, and I love the way he said your name, Theodore. I loved Bob. I did. At what point did they realize that you knew what you were doing, and you were a friend of the show? Right.
So I come from a long line of loudmouths, let's just put it that way. And I had been to 7 tapings. Back in the beginning, I'd only be able to really afford to go once a year, or, I always felt like I had to round somebody up to go with me. I didn't know if it was okay to go by myself. I finally found out they didn't really care. They're trying to fill seats. They don't care if you're there by yourself or if you have a party of 12. Um, so I went in the summer of 1990. It was July 1st because they actually shifted the taping schedule by a few days. And I had gotten, I don't know if frustrated's the right word, but I had been there so many times and been yelling out prices. And um, I think I had finally gotten somebody to listen to me on the previous taping. So I'd kind of gotten a taste of, actually being able to help somebody. And so on this particular taping, they showed the first item up for bids, and it was a home gym, and I knew it was $12.50. So as soon as Roddy finished the description, I yelled out $12.50, and I even beat Bob to the punch before he was even able to say, that goes to the one of you four who bids, closest to the retail price without going over. And so he stopped and he looked at me and he said, "Well, there's the first bid of The Price is Right." And he kind of poked a little fun at me because I had yelled out, a bid so early, and pointed out that I had no chance of winning because I wasn't in contestants row. And the contestants bid, and he said, and the actual retail price is, and he pulled out the tag and his eyebrows kind of shot up, and he looked at me and he said, "Stand up out there." So he had me stand up and he read the price, which was $12.50, and then it became this kind of big running gag through the first half of the show. And before the second item, before they came back from commercial, a young woman named Susan, who was in contestants row, turned around and mouthed, "Help me." She looked at me and she said, "Help me." And I kind of assured her, I'm like, "Sure, of course, no problem." Well, Bob, the stage manager, was counting him down back into the taping, and he looked at her, looked at me. The stage manager was like, 2, 1. And they went back into the taping, and Bob said, "I want you to know that during that commercial message, Susan was just overtly flirting with Theodore out here." And everybody started laughing. And that, to me, that moment was, seeing Bob in person is one thing, but then seeing him do something like that, where it is spur of the moment, he doesn't have any time to think about it. And he made it fun without, poking fun at anybody. And it actually took one more bid before Susan got her perfect bid and went up on stage to play her game.
Yeah, he was such an entertainer. That's the way
Yes.
Bob was, and he could shift. He could do. I mean, that's the way he was, and you could certainly see that not only on stage and on the game, but in the documentary when he was interacting with you and with the other guests. And he obviously called you he would say, "You're a loyal friend and true." So for anyone who was a super fan of The Price is Right, Bob Barker would refer to them as, "You're a loyal friend and true." That was his line. And Ted, that's what he called you often. And
Correct.
you attended how many tapings before you actually got on the show? Like actually
So
out of contestants row onto the stage.
Right. I had gone, like I said, I those first several years, couldn't necessarily afford to go a lot. Once I figured out I could go by myself, it was like, then I could go. I just decided, we have a 3-day weekend. I'll go down to The Price is Right and go to the Monday taping. And sometimes if they didn't have enough audience members, I'd get to go to 2. A couple times I decided I would stay an extra day and go to a Tuesday taping. And this was middle of 92. And I had finally gotten on vacation. I was a teacher and I taught summer school that year.
And you're a math teacher. So
Correct,
again, the
yes.
numbers, you're a numbers
Yes.
guy.
Yeah. I had actually planned to go Monday and Tuesday. And then after the Tuesday taping where I didn't get picked for the 23rd time, I thought, okay, I'm going to stay one more night. I'm going to go tomorrow. What the heck? I've got nothing to lose. And that was the day I actually got picked. And it was my 24th taping.
Did you have to do anything special to stand out? I mean, they already knew who you were, but
Right.
I always feel like when these kinds of shows, a producer is looking for something special. For example, so I had an uncle who was an auctioneer who could rattle stuff off. And the David Letterman folks, he was at a taping of Letterman and they pulled him immediately. They put him front row because he had this unique story. Is that what a producer is looking for?
So they always say, or Bob would always say, that when they chose the contestants, they were looking for people who were in a good mood that day. And there's I don't know if it's recently gone on YouTube, but it's a behind the scenes at a 1987, I think, taping of The Price is Right. And they show some of the interviewing where the producer, who was at the time was Phil Wayne, and he did the interviews. And he talks about, we're looking for people who are being themselves. And they always said they didn't like people who they could always tell when people were kind of faking enthusiasm. But I think what worked for me that particular day is first of all, I had a shirt, and the shirt had they always said shirts will not get you picked necessarily. But my shirt had said, "I'm here to kiss Holly." And on the back it said, "Sorry, Bob." And Holly was one of the models. And I had worn it to the first taping, and the producer didn't seem overly interested in the shirt. He just said, "You have lips for Holly," and he went on to the next person. And I took the shirt every single time I went, but I never wore it. I'd always wear something else. And that day I thought, okay, I didn't get picked Monday, I didn't get picked Tuesday. I'm going to wear the shirt and see what happens. And so, there's a break where during the processing, before you come back for the interviews, like 2 hours. So I went back to my hotel, showered and changed and put the shirt on. I came back to the studio, and a lot of people in line were like staring at my shirt and commenting and pointing, and it was really kind of cute. And I thought, then you're sitting there and you're waiting to go through the interview. And I think I was number 36 in line, so you're kind of one of the first interviews. And I thought, okay, what can I say? Because I'd always say I'm a middle school math teacher, and he may or may not have asked a follow-up question, but that day I thought I got to say something. So I thought, I'm going to tie the shirt in. And so when Phil got to me, he said, "Welcome back, Theodore." After that 8th taping where I had made an impression, he always remembered me, even if it had been months and he had seen thousands of audience members. He always remembered me when I went back. And I said, "Thank you." And he said, I don't remember, he said, "Tell me about yourself," or, what's going on today, or whatever he asked. And I said, "I'm still a middle school math teacher, and I'm still on the longest vacation I've ever had," which was what I had said the last 2 days. And I said, "But as far as today goes, forget the refrigerator, forget the new car. This is why I'm here." And he looked at my shirt and he laughed, and that threw me. I wasn't expecting him to laugh, because he would usually keep a good poker face. He always had a quick retort, but don't think I had ever seen him laugh. And so then I didn't know if I should finish what I was saying. And I think I just decided to finish what I was saying. And he just he chuckled and he said, "Okay." And if I'm remembering, he pointed at me when he said "okay." And there were always secret signals between him and his assistant. So I don't know if it was the point or the "okay," or what his secret signal was that day. But so then, I think that day they let us go right into the studio, which was not typical. Usually you had to wait a little while. And I went and I sat down in the audience, and the audience is slowly filling up as they're doing the interviews. And I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden I thought, I have to go to the bathroom. And I'm like, can I make it through the taping, or should I go to the bathroom? And it's like, I'm just going to go. There's plenty of time. Better just do it and get it over with. So I got up, and there were like 5 people between me and the row, at the end of the row. And I said, "I'm so sorry. Excuse me, pardon me, excuse me, pardon me." Went up the aisle, went back outside, went to the restroom, came back in the studio, came down to my row. I still to this day don't know. I'm a smart aleck by trade. There's a whole long history about why my brother and I are smart alecks. But as I started going back into my seat and I said, "Excuse me, I'm so sorry, pardon me," I said, "I promise I won't do this again until they call my name." And then I sat down, and my name was the first one they called that day.
Wow.
And I wonder if those 5 people thought, how did he know they were going to call his name? I had no idea. It was just an attempt to be funny.
What did it feel like when Roddy called your name? Finally.
It was
Finally.
exhilarating. I felt when I was sitting there, I felt if I've ever had a shot to get on, this is the day. But by the time they started the warm up, Roddy would come out and warm up the audience. I had kind of psyched myself out a little bit. The assistant who helps the producer comes out on stage, and she looks around, and she would mark a little card for the cameramen so they would know where to point the cameras when they call the names. And I couldn't look at her because one day I swore she was looking right at me and marking on her little card, and it was the guy behind me. And I thought, I don't even want to know where she's looking. I'm just going to not look at her. And then Rod came out, and his warm-up was always really funny. I mean, I got to the point where I could recite it with him because it was the same every time, but it was funny. And one of the things he would say is, I'm going to come on and say, this is The Price is Right. And then you're all going to get excited. And then he would say, don't let that bother you, so-and-so. That's when we turn on the seats. And everyone would laugh. And then he would say, and then it gets really exciting. I start calling out your names, and everyone would cheer. When he said names, he locked eyes on me. And I thought, why is he staring at me when he said I start calling out your names? So that threw me. And I thought, I was just like, at that point, I'm like, I don't know what they're doing. I don't even know what's happening. And then first name, they started the opening music, and they started the cameras, and we're all cheering. And I heard, it's very, very, very hard to hear your name. It's very hard to hear any names when they're calling because everyone's so loud. So they have cue cards. I heard him say Theodore, and I was like, what the heck? And there were 2 people next to me who I'd kind of made friends with in line, and she was wearing shorts, and I put my hand on her bare leg like, oh my God, they're calling my name. And I don't remember if I apologized to her after the show. But then I heard my last name, and I saw the cue card, and I just jumped up, and I was just so excited, and went out the row again. Those poor 5 people had to have me do that twice, and ran down to contestants row. And I was just, I was pumping my fists like, I cannot believe this is finally happening.
Oh. And you ended up winning a few prizes. You didn't make it to the showcase on your taping. Do you still have those prizes? Do you still have them?
Good question. So the recliner lasted quite a few years. I did finally get rid of it maybe about 8 years ago. It had started kind of the whatever the fabric. It's not really fabric. It was like Naugahyde or something, but it started cracking, and it was just getting a little too old. Coffee maker I had for several years, and I can't even remember. I think it stopped working. I do still have some of the dumbbells from the dumbbell set, and I still have the photo laminator that I won, which was one of the prizes for the punch board. And the baby clothing I gave to a couple that I knew at the time who were about to have a baby. So
Aww.
I figured that was an appropriate gift for them.
And so from then on, once you get up, you can't get up again, correct? It's like a decade long.
So back then the rule was you were ineligible forever. You couldn't ever be back on the show.
Wow.
But they did change that, yes.
Okay, so then they did change it, and then you're able to go back.
So I actually started going back before that rule was changed. When they went to Las Vegas for their 30th anniversary, and they did a special show in Las Vegas. And I mentioned to my sister, I was like, I really want to go to that. And she said, well, I really want to go too. And she had been to a couple tapings with me. And so we made a plan, and I went down, a few days ahead of time, and she and I drove up she lived in Southern California at the time. We drove up to Las Vegas, we checked into our hotel, and then we thought, okay, we better go scope out. It was going to be taped at the Rio, and we thought we better go scope it out and see what's happening. And so we drove over to the Rio, and we went inside and we're looking for where, the theater where they were going to film. And we spoke to a security guard, and the security guard said, no one's going to be allowed to line up before, I think it was 5:30 or 6 in the morning. And the tickets were going to be, they're going to start handing out tickets, I think maybe at 7 or 8. And so we were like, okay, well, good to know. So there's no point in getting here, because she actually,
Now, was Bob a part of this still, or was Drew
yes,
had Drew? Okay, so Bob was still a
yeah,
part of this.
Bob, yeah,
Okay.
because he did the first 35 seasons,
Yep.
so he was still, yeah. Um, but my sister, and the second time she went with me, we, we got in line at 11:40 p.m. the night before the taping
Oh my
because
gosh.
she couldn't sleep. And that's the thing, is it's so hard because you're so excited already, and
Yeah.
you need to sleep, but you can't sleep. So we just got up and got in line.
What did you think when Bob Barker announced he was going to retire?
So, he was 82, 83 when he retired. So, you can't fault the man. He worked a long, long, long time, um, and did a great job, all those years as the host. But, there's still that sense of, well, it's coming to an end. It's going to be sad to see him go. And it was, some of the staff were just in tears that last day. And some of another kind of back behind the scenes video I saw not too long ago, there was uncertainty on his last day because they hadn't picked a new host, and they had done some auditions, but nobody knew what was going to happen and if they were even going to continue with the show. So it was sad, I'm sure, for a lot of people that day.
And were you there the last day, his last show?
I was not. I went to one taping by myself during his last, and I wasn't eligible. I still wasn't eligible. But I decided, if he's going to retire, I feel like I want to go one last time. So I did that kind of early in the season, if I'm remembering. But yeah, people lined up for that last show. I think the first guy in line was there 2 days before.
Wow.
So there were some very dedicated people at that last show.
Yeah.
And he got picked. He was like the first name they called, I think.
Yeah, I know Bob often talked about, just how grateful he was to have the job that he had. He didn't think of it as a job, first off. It
Right.
was just like he
Right.
was having so much fun, and he was so thankful that he had this incredible opportunity and that it was given to him. So Drew Carey comes in, he takes over in 2007. And at what point did you go back to when were you eligible again? When were you allowed to be a contestant once again?
So at the end of season 36, the way I understand it, that's when they decided, okay, we're having problems filling the audience. With Bob, it was very unusual that they couldn't fill the audience. With Drew, who was, an unknown quantity for a lot of people, they just weren't able to fill the audience. They would have to hire paid audience members, as I understand it, and I think they still have to do this to this day, to get all the seats filled. And so they decided, okay, let's change the eligibility rules, and if it's been at least 10 years since someone's been a contestant, they can be on the show again. And so I heard about that because I'm not on it much, but at the time I was kind of active in an online forum about the show. And so when I saw that, I was like, well, if that's the case, I can go back and get on the show again. Maybe I'll do better this time, or maybe I won't. And I had been tracking the prizes and the prices because over those previous, I guess, 6 years, started with my sister. We didn't get into the Las Vegas show because there were just too many people and not enough tickets. So we went to an actual taping that following Monday, and then that started a series of about 10 more tapings, where I would go with family members or friends or people from work. And I was never eligible, but I would memorize the prices, so if somebody did get picked, I'd be able to help them. And ironically, when my dad's name was called, and we have the same name, so that was weird to hear my name a second time when I wasn't eligible. I couldn't get him out of Contestants Row. He only had 2 chances. They brought out a set of tables that I didn't know the price of, and then they brought out a barbecue where I gave him the wrong number, and then it didn't matter anyway because the price had gone up. So um,
Before, okay, so when Bob was the host and you were attending all these tapings, there was never a point that anyone said, Ted, you're cheating. Ted, you're a bad dude. Ted, we got a problem. They embraced you. They loved you, correct?
yes,
Okay.
Roger Dobkowitz, who was one of the producers, he got promoted about the time I started attending tapings. He actually is in the documentary, and he said we loved it when people knew the exact price because that meant they were watching the show, and that's what they wanted to encourage is watch the show. Nobody ever came up to me and said, you need to tone it down a little bit. You're helping too many people. Nobody ever said anything. So as long as I, wasn't getting any kind of flack from them, I figured, well, then I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. And if they don't like it, someone will say something. But yeah, that never happened.
Yeah. And the other thing too is not everyone was a super fan. And so if you were maybe at a taping, not everyone knew that they needed to listen to you either. That was the other part of it also. Okay, so September 22nd, 2008, you attend the taping and Drew Carey is the host.
That is correct. And that
And
was my
you
first taping with him.
become kind of friends, sort of like chums, I guess, with Terry and his wife.
Correct.
Okay, so Terry is in contestants row. He gets called. And you're helping him, right?
Yes. So the first item up for bids, he was called. I think he's the third of the first four contestants, and the first item up for bids was a sailboat that was $36.95, but it had been $35.95. So I was yelling $35.95. He didn't listen to me. He didn't know he should be listening to me. Nobody was even close to that number. And so when Drew read the price, his wife told him during the commercial, she's like, Ted almost got that one exactly right. You should probably listen to him. Well, then, of course, again, next item up for bids is something that I have no idea. I think it was a code or a camera or something that hadn't been on the show. But the third item up for bids was the big green egg barbecue. And that had been $900 for several seasons and had finally jumped to $11.75. So I signaled him with my fingers and told him it's $11.75. He bid $11.75 and he got exactly right. And he got up on stage and played a pricing game.
And the pricing game was, what was that?
The game was Switch, where there's two prizes and you have to decide if the prices are correct or if you should switch them. And for a couple reasons, I thought they should be switched, and turns out they shouldn't have been, and so he lost, which is just, he's one of many people I also helped lose because I didn't know what I was talking about. And it was unfortunate, but he didn't win his game.
So then, okay, he doesn't win his game, but then he has to spin the wheel by himself. And somehow he's able to spin the wheel and he gets to the Showcase Showdown, right?
Correct. Yes, he got 90 cents, so he beat the other two players.
Okay, so Showcase Showdown, it's he and a woman, is that right?
Yes, not Lauren, I'm sorry, Sharon, who I had helped win a car in the one-away game. She got the price exactly right with her first try because I was telling her what all the numbers were. And she did what I told her, and then she won the car. So they're already getting a little suspicious because how are all these people winning? Are they listening to that guy in the front row?
Oh, and you were in the front row for the taping.
Yeah, yep.
And so she's in the Showcase Showdown, and she's bidding on trips.
Yes. So the first showcase was, there was a pool table, there was a karaoke machine, and a high-low travel trailer. And she passed that showcase to Terry, and then her showcase was all trips.
Okay. And explain why trips are very difficult to price out.
Trips were always, even if they would tell you it's the same, it's the same hotel, if there was an airline involved, it's the same airline. depending on the time of year, the price would be different. So the best I could do on trips was just kind of a ballpark. For a while in the early 2000s, they were doing Southwest Airline vacation trips, and those tended to be pretty stable. They wouldn't. So if you saw it like last month, and then you saw it again, it might be the same price. In fact, I think a lot of times they did kind of stay the same price.
Okay, so Terry is trying to figure out his showcase and adding it all up, and he's looking at you and his wife in the crowd. And are you signaling numbers? What are you doing?
Yeah, so I added everything up while they were showing the prizes, and I had figured out it was $23,743, and I'd said to Linda, his wife, Linda, his wife, it's $23,743, and I said, but let me add it up again just to be sure, and so I did it again, and I said 23,743, and she said, yeah, that's what you said. And so now it's time for Terry to bid, and he looked at us, and I know I signaled it at least once, and Linda was probably signaling it. And if you watch what's in the documentary, which isn't necessarily what was aired when they showed the show on CBS, you can see him like looking and mouthing and like he's definitely getting information from someone. And then I was thinking, well, maybe we should just do like 23,500 if we're on the nose. Maybe that'll be too suspicious. So I started to do like a 23,500, and about the time I started that, he goes $23,743, and they lit up his bid, and Drew said it's a very exact bid, and the producer with her clipboard like started walking over to this area where some of the production staff sat and was just kind of staring. There was like it's a screen that you can't really see through on the stage side, but I guess they could see through it. And she was just staring into that screen, and I thought, yeah, I think he just hit it on the nose. And it just went downhill from there. I don't know how much of that you want me to go into, but when they went to the commercial, it was, I mean, usually it was 1-2 minutes tops. They do a quick, okay, when we're going to do the showcase reveal, and we want you to applaud and wave to the camera if you see the camera, and they did like a 20-minute stop down.
You have just helped Terry win the showcase showdown to the exact dollar amount, like the exact dollar amount. And does that also mean that he wins both too?
Yes.
According to the rules.
$250 or less,
and that's never
going over, you win both. So he automatically won both when he was on the nose.
And that's never happened before in Price is Right history.
There was an early episode that people talk about where I think the showcase was 2,800 on the nose, and people remember having seen it. In fact, and my friend D even remembers having seen it, where the contestant bid 2,800, but it was before the double showcase rule. So, and it was way before VCRs. It was like in 1973. But no one had ever gotten one right with weird numbers in the price. Definitely not.
And so Drew, there have been interviews post after this, and he said he thought he was going to lose his job. He's not happy. He was cussing up a storm. And there was a long article the Esquire did, and that's essentially why this documentary was made. And Esquire does a big breakdown about how Bob Barker would have handled it and how Drew Carey actually handled it.
Yep.
Very different. Very, very different.
Yep.
And Drew Carey was pissed. He was absolutely pissed, right?
Yes. There were some behind the scenes things happening. Roger Dobkowitz had been there, like I said. He'd been there from the beginning. He'd been producer since 1984. He had been let go at the end of season 36, which was only a few weeks, maybe a few months before that taping. And so when they were discussing during that 20-minute plus stop down how to proceed, some people were already saying, well, he's on that fan site, and maybe he leaked the price to someone, and that person is like, okay, do you know how many things still have to happen for that to even work. Like, even if I had been fed the price, the person next to me still has to get all the way, he spun 90 cents on the wheel. You only got a 33% chance of getting in the showcase from spinning the wheel. So it was kind of like they were panic. They were in panic mode, definitely panic mode. There was so much talking on the stage during that stop down, and like they had the camera pointed at me at one point. It wasn't on, but I could tell they were probably taking, pictures or whatever. They had it on Linda at one point. And I was convinced when they finally came back on and Drew read the price, and you can tell from his reaction he's underwhelmed. And I thought for sure, and then the new producer, Kathy Greco, who'd been there forever, she does not remember giving me stink eye. I have heard this through the grapevine. I've actually seen another podcast that she did. She was giving me major stink eye, just standing on the edge of the stage looking at me like, okay, buddy, we've got your number. And I thought for sure when that show finished, they were going to pull me backstage. They were going to pull Linda backstage. And it didn't help matters that when Linda came back down to her seat, Kathy was at the edge of the stage and she said, Linda. And I said, they want you. And she's like, what? And she turned around and Kathy's like motioning for her to come back up on stage. And I was like, and here we go. Well, she wanted Drew to autograph her shirt, so Drew autographed her shirt. Had nothing to do with anything about the perfect bid, but
So they
it was
didn't.
a little frightening for a minute. I thought no one was ever going to see me again.
So they didn't call the cops in, and they didn't do some investigation, even though they did think that you had cheated somehow.
Yeah, I think initially they thought, well, he must be cheating somehow, and then they figured out, well, he must just have memorized everything and, was able to just add it up and
Yeah, and the
that's
other thing
completely okay.
too is that would be like ignoring your history with the show, ignoring the fact that you can memorize numbers and the fact that you had done what you've done in the past, and
Right.
so that's ludicrous. The fact that
Yeah.
they would ignore all of that, and maybe they just, I don't know, maybe they just weren't in tune with kind of your history with the show, which clearly they weren't.
Drew certainly wasn't, because he had never been there when I was there.
Yeah, right. And was that the first time that you had actually attended a taping with Drew?
Yes. First, and I went to the taping right after that, and that's the last time I've been there.
What do you think about Drew Carey as the host?
He's wonderful, I'm sure, as a stand-up comedian. I don't understand how he was selected. I mean, I understand how he was selected. I guess I don't understand why he was selected. He had done Power of 10, which was a short-lived game show in the evenings, and somebody thought he did a wonderful job and thought he would be great at Price is Right. And the difference between him and Bob, like, I get that if you have a new host, there's going to be differences, and that's fine, but he is so almost like 180 degrees different. And I watched the show for a while after that perfect bid, but they've made it so that if you try to watch and see if you can remember prices, it's almost impossible. And so for me, that took the fun out of it, because for me it was watching and saying, oh yeah, that prize is, that yellow bar set is $782, which if you watch the old shows, I for some reason still know that.
What did Bob Barker mean to you and your family, growing up?
I think he just he was so good at making the show fun. Even if somebody maybe lost their game, he could still try to bring out something that would make it fun, even though the person didn't win. He was good at just playing off the contestants, and one of the kind of sad parts about as the show progressed is there was so much more commercial time added to the show. It took away from him being able to really interact a lot with the contestants. So he had to do what he could in that limited amount of time he had to talk with them and bounce off of them.
Yeah, it is funny to see some of these old episodes though, and sometimes they are a little cringy. I mean, the 70s, it's a little different time. Kind of like the Family Feud, kissing women on the lips. It's a little inappropriate now, but
Yep.
back
Yep.
in the day, that was kind of the normal thing. But no, I mean,
Yeah.
it was, yeah, I think, like I said, my family, we were big fans, of the show growing up too. So. I mean, you have no plans to go back, to attend a taping anymore. That's that ship has sailed, right?
For the most part, yes. CJ Wallace, who's the producer of the documentary, director of the documentary, um, he keeps trying to encourage me to try to go back and see if, maybe something will happen. Um, I feel like if I did that, I'd want to be prepared. And like I said, preparing now is so different than what it was like before that Perfect Bit episode. There's just, even when my husband and I went to a Price is Right live a couple months ago, I think it was last month, um, and I had gone on the website where they like list out all the prizes and stuff that are on the show each day. And I thought, well, I'll just track the grocery items and the small prizes because they use those a lot and they might still use the same ones. And I went through most of the season and there were very few grocery items that were even repeated once. So it was like, well, what is the point of this?
Yeah. You attended 37 tapings?
Yes, 36 was the perfect bid in the showcase. 37 was the one right after that where I was being watched like a hawk by the staff.
Which one was your favorite? Was it the one that you finally made it? Was it the eighth one?
I think it's, well,
Or was it was that the 24th one?
that was the eighth one was when I kind of became famous. That
Yeah.
one's a favorite. I feel like the show with Brandon, which is in the documentary, where I helped him. It took 5 bids for him to remember that I was in the audience, and my family had told him, if you get picked, listen to him because he'll know. And he got up on stage with a perfect bid. He won a car. He won $1,000 on the wheel, and then he won his showcase, which included a second car. And he was so excited. And so he gave me the biggest hug anyone has ever given me in my life after that show. And he was just so thankful and so sweet. And like I said in the documentary, he was a bundle of energy at 3 in the morning. And anyone who can be a bundle of energy at 3 in the morning and maintain it through the whole day, that takes a lot.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, you enjoyed helping other people too. It wasn't just about you, and you enjoyed helping other people win, which I thought was pretty cool. Do you have any contact with Terry at all to this day, or do you know what's going on with him?
So he and I had traded a few emails between when the show taped and when it was aired. And they actually buried it in December. It was supposed to air in November. And they switched it to December because I guess viewership is lower. And I guess they didn't want people to see it. And right after it aired is when I became aware that he was going on, you know, radio shows, and I don't know if podcasts were even a thing yet, but he was telling everyone he did it himself. And I was just like, excuse me? You did what now? And he wrote a book where he talks about how he and his wife, you know, watched the show, and we started watching. He talks in a interview. I think this was last year, the year before, where they started watching. He narrowed it down to the day. He said it was Mother's Day weekend, and we started watching the show right after that. And I saw that big green egg several times. Well, the big green egg was never on the show between May 8th or Mother's Day weekend and when that show aired, or when our show taped. So there was no way he could have ever seen the big green egg. And you know, his 743, that's our anniversary, is April 7th, and my wife was born in March, and that's where the three, and it's like, it seems pretty convoluted to me, but okay.
Wow.
But no, we haven't had any contact. There is a chapter in his book that's titled Ted, and it talks about me, and
Yeah,
yeah,
interesting.
but he doesn't ever give me any credit for helping.
Ted, I'm so glad that I was able to talk with you. And again, the documentary is fascinating. And as you know, someone who loved The Price is Right, it was great to finally connect with you here. And you, by the way, the Netflix documentary, it was on Netflix. They sometimes take it off though, Netflix, but it's called The Perfect Bid, the contestant who knew too much. And you can also see it on YouTube too, just Google it. Ted, thank you again so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. And thank you for watching this episode of The Curious Bee. More episodes up right now on Fox Local. They are, of course, for free.